remember those cutoffs from the rear leg? Here's where those come into play. I took the cutoffs from the rear leg, went over to the bandsaw, and cut two rough parts out. Both of them 1.5 inches less in total inside length than the front and rear apron. So I cut them a little bit longer, and then I went over to the jointer planer and I jointed one side flat and then another side 90 degrees to it. Took the jointer, flipped it into planer mode, and thickness planed this guy until they were 1 inch in total thickness. And then I headed over to the table saw and cut them so they're 1.25 inches wide. Now with my part 1 inch thick, 1.25 inches deep, and whatever the length is of your part on the inside minus 1.5 inches, I headed over to the bench, planed them on 3 sides. I skipped the side that went on the jointer. We're never going to see that, and that's the side that's going to connect to the aprons. So I planed on 3 sides, and then I chamfered all the edges. After chamfering all the edges with a square, I marked out 1 inch in on each side, and then a good amount of space in for each. So for the long one, I believe I did 7 inches, and then for the smaller rear apron piece, I marked out 4 inches in. These are all going to be spots for our screws. Next thing I did was I took a square, set at 1/2 inch, and I marked a cross mark for this, giving me a crosshairs so I could know where I want to drill. And over at the drill press, I took a screw that I was going to use and figured out how deep I wanted to drill, and then with a Forstner bit I removed waste. And after the waste was removed from the Forstner bit so I could get the screw at the correct depth, then I took a 1/8 inch bit and drilled a pilot hole on each one of these holes. And that brings us to now. So what I want to do now is attach these cleats to the rear and front apron. So what do we need to do? Well, what we need to do is we need a square set for 1 inch, because we're going to put these guys 1 inch below the top of both the rear and front apron. I got some paste wax here for my screws, some glue, and a brush to help me spread the glue. I got a whole bunch of screws, so 8 in total, some quick clamps, a drill, and an impact driver, and some tape, which I've already used. And I set a depth stop with the tape on my 1/8 inch bit. So I know how deep I need to drill, and I won't drill too far and punch through my aprons. So you make sure your square is set at 1 inch, because we want to place this guy 1 inch down. All right? And then we're going to kind of find where a good middle spot is here. So I think that's kind of in the middle. So just very lightly, I'm going to mark out with the pencil where this is positioned right now. Just 2 little marks. With those 2 marks made, that just shows me roughly where center is for this piece. I'm going to take it off. Grab some glue. And just put a little bit of glue on this. We don't need a lot. We're not looking for squeeze out. We don't want the clean A squeeze out. We just want a little bit of extra support. So just brush the glue in. And with my ruler here, I can slide it on the edge. Find where that little pencil mark I made is. Grab a quick clamp. Make sure I'm good at the back. It's good there. Tighten that up a little bit. Looks like I'm good all around. Grab another quick clamp double check still. So now this guy clamped. I'm gonna put my screws real quickly into the paste wax. Take my drill with my depth stop and drill through the pilot holes down, making a new pilot hole into the apron. Take my screws and drill them in. All right, one down, one to go. All right, these look great. We got our cleats on, nice and rock solid. The screws are gonna provide clamping pressure for the glue that's there, and the glue's just helping provide some extra support. So we're good to go here. You're more than welcome to make some plugs and plug these up too. Get some similar grain, plug them, glue them a little bit, let it sit for a little bit, and then just take a block plane and bring them down to the same surface as the cleats. We still have a few more things to go, not much, almost there. Then we can dry fit the chair and glue it up. First of those few remaining things left is we remember our panels and our upper rails. I told you to save the cutoffs. Well, this is when we're going to need them. Well, here they are, those two cutoffs I said we needed to save later in the project. Well, now finally is the time when we're going to get to use them. We probably only actually need one, but nonetheless, I have them both saved here. And what we're going to do is head over to the table saw and cut off two little strips that are just a little bit less than 3/8 of an inch wide. And we're going to get them to get recessed into our upper rails all the way on the bottom. So let's head over to the table saw and do that. All right, I have the table saw set for just a hair under 3/8 of an inch for the fence. I have a piece of plywood here that I use as a sacrificial push stick. At some point I'll need to probably cut a new one, but for right now we're good. It lifts my hand above the piece, and it's plywood, so I have no problem with the blade cutting into it. And it's going to cut two strips off of this that are just under 3/8 of an inch. These also don't need to be the full length of our groove. So I marked in 1/2 inch, and I'm just going to take 1/2 inch off on one side. That'll give us a little bit of leeway on the front and back of the groove. We're over at the bench, and what we need to do is we need to change the thickness of these so that they'll fit inside our grooves. Remember, we cut these guys off, so they're too thick right now. There's no way I'm getting this piece into my groove. So yeah, we're going to be planing in the wrong direction, but no one's ever going to see this piece. And I've got a really sharp blade, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem. So I'm going to start planing these guys down and fitting them into the grooves. The other thing I want to point out is I'm bringing this router mat with me everywhere right now, as far as wherever I put these pieces down. So they're ready and surfaced and prepped and everything. The last thing I want is a ding or a scratch or a dent. So I'm bringing the mat with me and bringing the pieces with me and putting the pieces on the mat. So anyways, let's get to it and start to get the right thickness for these parts. Don't want to push it all the way, because once it's in, there's not going to be much getting it out. But I just want to test it out. Oh yeah. Okay, this one's good. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to apply a very small bead of glue onto the bottom of this piece. work it in. Okay, now the piece is in the groove. I'm going to take the panel, make sure everything's lined up. Grab a piece of plywood and pound this panel in. Okay, they took the panel out. Now I'm going to take a square and see how deep I am. Okay, let's see, in the front, 3/8 of an inch. Three-eighths of an inch in the back. Three-eighths of an inch in the middle. Perfect. The last little thing to do is the back bevel, the shoulders on our rails and aprons. I like to do this just because it helps to bring everything home a little bit. Gives you a little bit of added security, just in case something's off a little bit. So what's nice about the back beveling is we remove material, but we still keep the shoulder here, but we move material just a little bit off of the shoulder, and then when the apron or rail comes into contact with the leg, the clamps can actually, the pressure from the clamps can push everything together just a little bit more and make an indent into the leg, and this brings everything just a tad bit closer together. So let me show you how to do that. Okay, we're looking at one of my upper rails, and I'm just going to take my pencil and run a line along the inside here, all around. And this line for me is just a visual guide, making sure I don't go over the line. Okay, so you see I got a line all the way around the piece. With my chisel here, I'm just going to come in and work down from the line, paring wood away. All right, that's one shoulder back bevel. Let me show you on the camera. See, we're looking pretty good all the way around. So that's one. I've got a whole stack of parts here to work on. So I'm going to actually shut the camera off, turn on some music, and just groove and work through all of these. When we see each other again in a couple of seconds, it'll be time to dry fit the chair, test everything out, make sure there's nothing we need to change or manipulate or do anything to. And then once we got that guy dry fit, it'll be time to glue it up. So today's a really big day. It's time to dry fit and then glue up our chair. There's a couple things I want to do first before we even dry fit the chair, and that is I want to glue up these slip tenons into the crest rail, and I want to glue some dowels into the arms. So let's do that real quick, and then we'll let those sit for half hour, 45 minutes or so, and then we'll dry fit the chair. If you haven't done so already, now's the time to cut some new slip tenons for your crest rail. Here, I'm pointing towards my new slip tenons that I cut and tried, made sure they fit properly inside of the leg and the crest rail, and I've labeled after the fitting process which side goes into the crest rail, which side goes into the leg, and what direction it goes into. I put a little bit of glue inside the mortise of the crest rail, and I also put just a little bit of glue on the part of the slip tenon that's going to go into the mortise of the crest rail. Then make sure to get the slip tenon fit into the crest rail. With the glue there and everything really tight, you may have to pound this in so it seats completely. Once the slip tenon is properly seated inside the crest rail on one side, you can go ahead and do the other. Don't worry about the squeeze out for right now. Let it sit for a couple of minutes and then get rid of the squeeze out with a chisel. Make sure there's no squeeze out left after you glue in these slip tenons. When we glue up the chair, the arms are already going to have a dowel glued into it. We're going to use regular wood glue to glue this dowel halfway down into our arms. When we glue up the chair, we'll use some epoxy inside of our larger holes to glue up the arms to the legs. For now, what I want you to do is just grab a little glue, get into the mortise for the dowel in the arm, spread it around, and then get just a little bit of glue on the dowel as well so that we have enough glue connection here. Insert that dowel into the arm. Let it start to glue up. And then in a couple of minutes you can remove the squeeze out. Make sure there's no squeeze out left behind. And so we have a nice flat surface to mate between the arms and the legs. And we're just going to let these sit for about a half hour, 45 minutes. I'm probably going to go in the house, turn on Netflix, and watch an episode or something, and then come back. But let's let them sit for a little bit, and that way the glue will have enough time that it's taking effect, nothing's going to slip, and then we can start to dry fit our chair. It's time to start to dry fit our chair. The first place I want to start is here in the back. So what we're going to do is dry fit the back, get that all clamped up, dry fit the front, get that all clamped up, and then dry fit the two sides together. The reason why we're doing that is the arms and the panels. We have to have these two sides assembled, and then once they're assembled, then we can bring the chair together, because the arms and the panels, because the arms go inside of the leg, and the panels need to be seated. It's a whole little jigsaw puzzle. So first thing I'm going to do here is get everything clamped up. I have my lower rail, my lower apron, my crest rail, my two legs, and my back slats. And I have, remember, we need a straight edge for this, because these guys have to be at 17 inches. So let's start. So the first thing I'm doing now is putting the back slats into the crest rail and the lower apron, and then bringing everything together. Okay, I'm still a little too tall for the legs. Let me pull this apart. Now that it's all roughly put together, I'm going to take my straight edge with a square, and the top of this guy here, the rear apron, needs to be at 17 inches. So I'll take the bottom of the square, put that on the bottom of the leg, kind of flare it up. That way I know where the bottom of the floor is going to be. And I am actually low. So let's knock this up a little bit. Okay, I've got some leather here, some blue tape. And I'm going to flip this guy over, grab some of my blue tape, and tape up the top of the leather to the side of the leg. Grab a clamp, bring this together. I'm going gonna put some leather on the top as well. And clamp this together. So now that we got the the back, let's do the front too. I'm gonna set this down. And same thing here. We're gonna grab our legs. Grab the ruler and check on the height here as well. I'm looking to get close. We'll finesse everything when we clamp up the whole chair. Okay, that's perfect on this side, 17 inches. $17 on this side too. I'm gonna grab my clamping blocks. These are the guys we made earlier. We've been using the whole project. And I'm gonna tape these two on. Grab a clamp. Once again, not too tight, just enough to bring everything together. I'm gonna start with the bottom. I gotta get this together first. Now, if you fit your joints really well, you should be able to just use a little bit of hand pressure to get them in. Everything's perfect at the same thousandth of an inch or so. If they're really tight and you have to pound these guys in, well, the joint may be a little too tight. You should think about taking a dial caliper and checking the thickness of your tenon and the width of your mortise. So this is good. Now for the upper rails. Now this is where it gets to be a little bit interesting because of the puzzle here we got going on. So this guy's for the right. Yeah. And I want to check, oh, I got the right piece here. Here's the right arm. Let me get the panel into the arm, but not fully seated yet. Going to angle it up a little bit. And we're not even close to being in it. I'm going to be okay with that for right now. Let's get the other side set up. Let's get the front. I'm going to start by getting the dowels in. I'm going to tape some more of these leather pads up to the back here. Going to tape up some more of these clamping blocks here to the bottom of the front leg. So what we're looking for is 17 inches all the way around for the top rails. Yep, good on both sides. Let's just keep going around. Okay, on the sides here, I'm low. Definitely low. We've got to knock this up a little bit. This little guy here, these guys on the bottom, they're supposed to be at 5 inches. I'm going to get a square. And I'm going to set the square at 5 inches. Back is definitely higher than 5. Okay, now we're at 5. I'm going to tighten up the back here. While I'm looking here, make sure that this guy is nice and tight. Mine's not right now. You can either try to hit it together or grab a clamp. Okay. Yeah, and that pulled together right away. Yeah, nice and tight. You want to make sure if you need to, just pull that guy together. Okay, let's do the arms. Start to clamp that down just a little bit, and I'm going to try to visually center it. And once I have that visually centered, get a little bit of clamping pressure. Take the dead blow hammer and hit from the back. I was pretty sure this wasn't seated all the way, so I want to make sure everything's nice and seated. If this is a really tight joint, this piece may not actually be seated all the way. So you may have to knock it down a little bit. See, like that, I hit it, tapped it once, and it just unbent. Now we're seated. Now we're in. Okay, crest rail. You can see there's a lot to this chair when we clamp it up. Let's make sure that we're at the exact same height on both sides. I'm going to take the square and put it on the inside of the leg here. And just kind of give it a visual look, see where I am. Looks about the same. Yeah, it looks good. Awesome. Now that we have everything clamped up, let's start inspecting all of our joints. We want to make sure everything closes nicely. See if we need 2 clamps somewhere. I'm actually going to think about putting 2 clamps here on the back. Okay, yeah, just go around and start inspecting all of your joints. Make sure everything's closing tightly. You know, some of the leather may be in the way or the tape. Just move it if you need to. This is the upper right side rail into the front of the leg. Very tight. I have to pull back the leather, but we're really good. You can see it's a really nice, clean, tight joint. Here's where the crest rail meets the right leg. That's just really nice and tight. Looks great. Okay, it's time to glue up. We're going to do this in 2 steps. We're going to get the back together, and then get the front together, and then bring everything else together. Now we need some help here because we need some extra time. So we're going to have 2 things that are going to help us out with that. Number 1, we're going to use some Title Bond extended wood glue, which is going to give us a much longer open time. And number 2 is we're going to be using some epoxy for the arms. And this is going to be used to go inside of the top of the front legs, where the dowel is going to go in. And this has an hour set time. So we've got a good amount of time with this, good amount of time with that, the Title Bond extended, and the biggest benefit of all, beyond all this too, is that we know where to put our parts now because we back beveled everything. So we got these little indents on our pieces. We know exactly where 17 inches is for top and 5 inches for these lower rails. And we even know where the crest rail is going to go because there's some indents there too because we back beveled the crest rail. So first off, I took a brush, one of these acid brushes, and I took about the first, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch or so off of a chisel and made it a little bit shorter so the bristles are a little tighter than they normally are. It's going to help. So let's get some of this extended Title Bond into a little Dixie cup. And this glue's cheap, so don't worry about putting too much in here. I'd rather have enough in here than not enough and have to reach for the bottle again. I also have a watered rag and a cup of water. It's on the bench over here right now. I don't want it near my stuff, but that's for squeeze out. And you can see I have all my clamps up here. They're lined up. There's a couple clamps in the table saw. Clamps for the back are back there. The clamps for the front are here. So let's get to it. Number one, back slats. So we can't put any glue on the slats themselves. So we're going to put glue on the mortises instead, or only in the mortises. So we want to get a nice generous amount of glue in here because we're only going to put glue on one surface. There we go. Alright. Let's put some glue in the mortises on the crest rail. Okay, I'm not going to try to hammer this home yet. I'm not sure what the distance is between the these two mortises here, between the mortise for the crest rail and the mortise for the rear apron. So next thing to do is get some glue into these mortises. There's a little bit that got on the outside. I want to make sure there's nothing that's going to cause any squeeze out. We don't want squeeze out here. We're trying to prevent that. Oh, I want to get a little bit of glue on the tenons. Almost forgot. We don't want to go all the way up to the very edge. We just want to get a little bit on the farthest part away. If you put to the edge, it'll start creeping up. If it starts to creep up, then it'll be squeezed out. Okay, I need to come down a little bit. There we go. Okay, let's clamp across. I think this rail is way too low, but let's double check. Yeah, I'm too low. That's what I thought. It looked too low before. I just wasn't sure. I wanted to double check. Yeah, 17. A little bit more on this side over here. Perfect. We're at 17 on both sides. Take a square. I'm just going to make sure I'm at the same height on both sides. Okay, I'm at 1 inch there. That looks good. It's time to clamp it up. Okay, I used 2 of these last time. We're going to do 2 again. I'm trying to line the clamps up so they're parallel. They're both hitting at the same spot, same amount of distance. You want them to be not angled, but straight. So this is done. This back is glued up. There's no, I can see glue inside the joint, but it hasn't seeped into the other tenons, or mortises that is. So that's perfect. This is good. I'm going to pick it up, set it aside, and we'll glue up the front now. Same thing at the front. We'll get some glue into each mortise. Make sure we're at 17 inches. And then we can talk about doing the sides of the chairs. A little bit of glue on the tenon. Okay. Looking for 17 inches again. Okay, I'm just a little too tall on this side. A little too short on this side. Had to be something. Okay, let's throw a clamp across it, and that'll help get a little bit of pressure and we'll knock it in. Okay, just a little too high. Perfect. Oh wait, we can't do that with this here. Now let's find out where we are. Yeah, we're good there. Okay, we have a little squeeze out inside these joints, and we need to clean that out right away. So just to clarify, the squeeze out that's here is not actually on the mortise wall for the next mortises, next joints for the aprons, I'm sorry, the rails, but there's a little bit that's squeezed out onto the tenon from the front apron, and that's what I'm cleaning up. Alright, so let's talk about doing the sides. The sides have their own complications. Number one, the dowel that's got to go into the top of these legs here. So let's start with that. We're going to need to take this epoxy, mix it up, get it ready to go, and then we need to find out how much needs to go inside the hole, right? So basically what we're looking to do is put the dowel in and not have the epoxy come out of the hole, but have the epoxy fill the gap between the larger hole in the dowel and come up very close to the top. So what we're going to use is an extra dowel, drop it in and see how much material or epoxy needs to be added. We'll start off a little bit, we'll test it a few times, then we'll get the right amount on both sides. And once we have that, then we can glue up the rest of the chair. So I'm going to get that epoxy mixed up, ready to go, and we'll come back in a few minutes. Okay, I mixed up my epoxy. I've got my front actually standing with 2 clamps on it, so it's good. I have my dowel to test out my amount of epoxy, and I have some acetone in case I spill anything. So let's get to it. So I made sure I got this really nicely mixed. It just flows too. Okay, I think we're good. I'm just going to add a little bit back in because I took some out from putting it on the dowel. Okay, here we go. First thing we need to do is let's get the bottom assembly. Okay, so for the bottom assembly here, okay, we can't put any glue on the mortise because it's just going to come through. So we basically just need to put a little bit of glue on the tenons. And not too far over, just kind of in the middle, so that if there's any, we don't want any squeeze out, and we don't want any coming out of the mortises. Okay, I have a little bit of squeeze out. Let's clean that up right now. Remove this acetone. All right, we'll set that aside. And it's time to rock and roll. We're gonna put a little bit of glue, not on the panel itself, but in the groove. Get the other one. Okay. Awesome. Time to put some glue into the mortises. All right, put some glue into the mortises on the back. Okay, let's just get some glue on the tenons and get this thing together. But sure looks good. Everything's nice and tight. Everything's at 17 inches, 5 inches down here, 17 up here. I hope. That's what it looks like with the ruler and the table. But definitely have to do this in multiple steps, just like I did. Glue up the front, glue up the back, let them sit half a day, even overnight. I let them sit for a couple hours, probably 2 or 3. Let this guy sit overnight, come back tomorrow, we'll do some final sanding, get some dents out, and it'll be great. So, see you guys in a little bit.